I just wrapped up chapter 1 of PvP Civilization, and let me just say, I think that finale was one of my favorite videos I've ever made on my channel. It honestly felt just so cool to watch it live, and it's just so awesome to see so many people saw it the way I did. So, anyways, PvP Civilization has been ongoing for around 6 months now, which is pretty crazy. And I was going to wait until the movie came out to start going behind the scenes of this one and giving additional lore to the series. So, obviously, huge spoilers to those who haven't finished PvP Civilization from here on out. To start, this series has a lot going on. This was the first new series I started since the parkour series ended, and I wanted to tackle a much bigger and more complex idea with this one. Parkour Civ was extremely linear and didn't really focus too much on character development. It focused more on my journey against the world. But with PvP Civ, I wanted to take a much more grounded approach to this one, and my whole goal was to really make the audience feel connected with the characters. So that's what I was aiming for. But at the same time, the universe of PvP Civ has literally so many different things going on, which is why I wanted this whole first chapter sort of deal to be really slow paced, to make sure the key concepts were understood, like having your life be determined by weapon durability, being unable to drop your weapon, things like that. So with that being said, and by the way, I'm just throwing this in here. Seawatt won't know this until he sees this video, but he can only get a role in PvP Civilization if he beats me. So let's see how that turns out. Anyways, I'm going to structure this video into first half talking about some lore elements of the story and explaining the meanings behind different scenes. And then second half, I'm just going to talk about a few parts where I just want to go over what it kind of looks like to be behind the scenes on my end when I make the stories. So yeah, let's get into it. Also, I'm just calling it right now. I haven't fought seawatt yet, but I'm just going to assume that he didn't win any of the exchanges. So looks like we won't be seeing him in chapter 2. All right, let's jump into the lore stuff. I need to figure out what things I want to reveal and not reveal because, well, let's just say we're working on stuff, but there is lore to the story that definitely has potential to still be woven into the story. And there's also lore that I think just my character would never find out about. So if I leave out any big things, that probably just means they'll be explained in the actual story. So I will start with the lore on the guy I first fought in episode 1. So knowing what we all know now about the origin of sword people and whatnot, I think it's possible to connect the dots about who this guy was, and that would be a brand new wooden sword. The guard friend says my opponent is someone who has full durability, and this guy starts rambling about not believing the laws of PvP Civilization. So this was someone who was just born as a sword and knows nothing about the world. Obviously having no experience to realize that dropping your sword is not something you want to do, and fighting other people is quite literally the thing you have to do to survive. So I thought this concept was cool because it almost directly contradicts the direction I went with Parkour Civilization, where the idea of having to parkour to survive wasn't necessarily the case. But in this case, we realized that PvP has real influence on whether someone lives or dies. So cool stuff with that first fight when we look back on it. Yeah, that's all with that guy. On to the next thing. We've got the Tabby critical hit lesson. I hope I'm remembering this right, but I'm more than confident Tabby has a line where she says, "No one in here knows how to do a critical hit." So this does hint, obviously, at the idea that she knows more than she's letting on. So tad bit of foreshadowing right there. But knowing what we know about Tabby's character, this also shows that she was certain by then that I was no threat, and she was willing to help me get better in order to potentially help her succeed down the line. And two, that I was a natural-born sword and not someone from another civilization pretending to be a sword. So, yeah, that's kind of all we've got on that scene. Moving on to the Chosen One room, my ultimate ability of having the respawn armor stand in my room. And while explaining this one, I have to drop this incredible behind-the-scenes improv storytelling on my end because I think, one, it's funny, and two, it's cool to see how mistakes can actually be turned into a better story. So, with that being said, this armor stand being solely in my room was completely a mistake. I realized as I was done filming episode 1 that I'd never put armor stands in the other rooms, and I was like, alright, I'm too lazy to go back and re-record everything, so instead, I'm going to pull the Evbo special and shape the story around that to make sense. So, I already knew my character needed a respawn mechanic, and so I just decided to make it work around that armor stand. I thought that was pretty cool, but anyways, on to the lore aspect of the Chosen One room, so to speak. The room itself is in one of the bigger rooms available to buy at the wooden sword level, meaning the only reason I got the power is because I was willing to drop some PvP cash on some real estate. So the reason why it's in one of those rooms is by design to protect the swords from outsiders. So the armor stand is meant for the swords to use, and I don't think assuming that is anything crazy. And having that power fall into the hands of the outsiders wouldn't be good for the sword people, that is. But if people are invading from the outside, it's more likely that those people from the other civilizations will be focused more on conserving their swings rather than buying a bigger house. So I thought that placement of the armor stand made sense with the story. And who knows, maybe I'll actually brush up on that concept within the actual story, but I guess we'll see. Anyways, on to Parrot's character at the end of episode 3, maybe? Parrot says if I'm the chosen one, I'll have to die. And in this context, he means that he knows that all of the other civilizations are looking to wipe out the rest of the swords. So basically, what he's realizing is that the other civilizations won't stop coming after me since I am the one with the infinite life power, and they'll only give up once I'm gone for good. So, long story short, it's like having the armor stand respawn, put a target on my head, and Parrot knows that in this scene right here. Speaking of Parrot, that brings me to what he was saying here about people not wanting to leave this place. And Parrot says later on that people are either sent here with the mission to retrieve the Eternal Sword or as punishment. And what we see happening at the Iron Sword level is everyone not even bothering to fight each other because they know there's really no way down. So I like to think regardless of what reason the outside people came here for, once they get to level 3, they abandon their mission to keep going because they realize if they can use me for infinite durability, that's more favorable to them than leaving here and having a limited lifespan. So to sum it up, people in here have started to act in their own self-interest rather than doing what their civilization expected of them. So they've gone rogue, like Prince Zam's character, for example. Next, we got a quick little scene in here with Minutech where he says I'm the only one in here with a video journal machine. I thought it was cool to note that Minutech told me that knowing it wasn't true. So he wanted to essentially guide me to find the truth myself rather than him telling me on his own. So the Diamond Swords recognized that Tabby would be the only one I would turn to if they ever suggested she wasn't who she said she was. So they were in a bit of a compromising situation where all they could really do was sit back and watch things unfold. And that's kind of the reason why Minutech said that. So little backstory to that conversation. Finally, at the end, we have this scene, the scene where Tabby takes me out. So this is the one where I wanted to make sure the point gets across that she chose not to take me out with the Eternal Sword. I said right before that if she does do that, I won't even respawn, and she starts hitting me with it. But the last scene where she's holding an axe shows that at the last second, she had second thoughts and she switched out her weapon. So that was what that last scene was emphasizing, the fact that she hesitated and showed that she might not have completely lost her sense of friendship. So I just wanted to make sure that very, very important point got across. All right, well, that's all I got right now for lore stuff. Now, I don't even know if I have much for the behind the scenes things, but I'm just going to throw in random bits. So, the scene here at the end of episode 5 was foreshadowing for the reveal that Tabby was from the Axe civilization. She's standing just under the axe in this one. I thought that was a really cool shot, and I don't know if many people picked up on that. So that was a cool one. The sword statue is broken to symbolize the literal fact that the sword is broken. So there is story behind that, and don't worry, that hopefully will be explained in the story. I'm acting as if I'm not the one who comes up with the story, but it should be explained. Anyways, the last thing I got is about the fourth wall breaks. So this one is actually something that I thought about going into the series, and I almost went down a route of explaining it within the story. But the cool part about coming out with an episode every few weeks is I can see the reactions to different things that I try, such as the fourth wall breaks in this series. And I think the consensus was that the breaks were funny to an extent, but they distracted from the story. And I totally understood that, so I decided to tone it back for the later half of the series. With that being said, my original thought process goes back to my simulation movie, actually. and I was going to tie the 4th wall breaks into that, subtly, of course. Essentially, without going into detail, I thought of having this Evbo PvP universe be closer to the original Evbo, if you will. The simulation story is complicated, but long story short, I was going to say how the video journal machines themselves existing in this universe was somehow like the cause for a 4th wall break connection. And so I had at least some thought process behind it, but toning down the breaks at the end in hindsight was a great call. So it's all good. But point is, there was some thought put into that. All right, well, that is all I have. There's a lot going on in this series for sure, and so I definitely didn't cover everything that could be covered. But that being said, there's still stuff that I want to elaborate within maybe future PvP Civilization episodes. No spoilers, but yeah, that's all for today. See ya.